Good afternoon, everyone. It's 2 o'clock, so I think we'll get started on our meeting. We have a fair bit to get through today, so we'll get things rolling. First thing on our agenda, of course, is to adopt the agenda. So I have a recommendation here that the agenda for the December 13th, 2021 regular meeting of council be accepted and passed. Can I get a move by Steve, seconded by Sherry? All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We'll move on to disclosure of pecuniary interest. I have none to disclose with regard to anything on today's agenda. Councillor McCabe?
I have none, Andy.
Okay. Councillor Burke?
No.
Councillor Hearn?
No.
Councillor Yake?
No.
Okay, thank you. We have a couple of presentations on our agenda today. First up, we have Grand River Conservation Authority. Karen, have you got them?
Yes, Bruce has been moved in as a participant, and has Sonia.
Yeah.
So she's on the screen there. Bruce, we need you're on mute and your camera's not on.
Has Samantha tried to get in, Karen?
No. Oh, sorry. Yep. Hold on. There's somebody just there now. I'll just move them in. It just says GRCA. I don't have a name. You'll recognize them when you see them though, right?
Should be Samantha Lawson. Yeah, and it said that'll be that's.
Are you Samantha?
I am.
Okay. Bruce, you're off mute, but we still can't see you.
Yes, sorry, Karen.
Okay.
I know this happened once before and I don't know where I turned my camera on.
Okay, we can hear you.
So welcome to Bruce, Samantha, and Sonia. Glad you were able to join us today. And I'll turn the floor over to you. I'm not sure who wants to speak first or whenever, so I'll just let you guys sort that out.
Thanks, Mayor Lennox. I'll start. I apologize for not getting my one-pager kind of a background on what's happened over the year to you in time to be circulated. I thought I'd send it soon enough, but it didn't get in your package for your reading on the weekend. It may, well, probably hasn't been passed out because you're not in the office. So
no, Bruce, I did email it out. I emailed it just about an hour ago after we emailed. Yep.
Okay. Again, my apologies. I didn't want to really read this whole thing. I just thought it was as background. So I think what I'll do is let Samantha and Sonia go ahead and present the budget. And I may add a few comments at the end, or we'll see if you have any questions. And I could go through and kind of highlight some points in that document that I had circulated, but I don't want to take up too much of your time. And I think it's better that we spend it listening to the budget for 2022 and also to try to deal with any questions that you have. So if I'll turn it over to Samantha, and between Samantha and Sonia, they can give you an overview of the budget for the coming year.
Great. Okay. So I'm just going to start to share my screen, if that's okay. Okay. All right, so can everybody see the title slide there? Yep, yeah. Perfect. All right, well, thank you very much for the opportunity to present the GRCA's draft budget. The Grand River Conservation Authority the Grand River watershed is one of the largest in Southern Ontario. The Grand River and its tributaries lie at the heart of one of the richest and fastest growing regions in Ontario. We know that future prosperity of the watershed, its municipalities and communities are linked to the health of the river, its tributaries, and the natural environment. The Grand River Conservation Authority operates a range of programs in engineering, planning, land management, recreation, and education. Our strategic mandate is to develop and implement watershed-based programs that protect people and property from flooding and erosion, improve the health of the watershed, connect people to the environment, and manage our land holdings in a responsible and sustainable way. Our programs balance human, environmental, and economic needs so that we can deliver on our vision of a healthy watershed now and for future generations. We build relationships and trust with our watershed partners to achieve our common goals. And at this point, I'm going to pass it on to Sonia Radoja. She's our Manager of Corporate Services to present the next few slides.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to our budget to you. The budget challenges for 2022 are the same as what we were dealing with last year, namely the new regulations and COVID. In terms of the new provincial regulations, we were referring to them as mandatory versus non-mandatory. And now what's evolving in a lot of talks now is sort of 3 categories. Category 1 being basically mandatory type programs where we continue to use the levy methodology. Category 2 is programs that are not mandatory, but that a municipality may ask a conservation authority to deliver a certain program, and in which case you will have to come up with, or you may already have in place in a lot of circumstances, memorandums of understanding or agreements to continue to deliver those programs. And thirdly, are programs category 3 that the authority determines are programs that should be delivered. And we either are self-funding those programs, or we have to go to municipalities and ask them to participate in that program and contribute funding in an agreed upon mechanism. The second area, again, as I said, is to continue to manage this COVID and pandemic environment. Next slide, please, Sam. So in terms of the new regulations and mandatory versus non-mandatory, or categories 1, 2, 3, there were phase 1 regulations that did get released during the year, and they prescribe what the mandatory programs and services are. And we have to submit a transition plan by the end of this year. The transition plan is going to help outline the steps of how we come up with an inventory of programs and services, and the steps that will be followed in order to enter into agreements as required with municipalities. And the regulations did indicate now that the things will come into effect not until January 1st, 2024. That was a recent change. It was going to come into effect on January 1st, 2023. So they have given an extra year, because they haven't even released, my last bullet point, the phase 2 regulations that deal with pricing and levy distribution. So they can't, well, they realize that their timelines have been extended as well. So they're giving us more time. So the following, as a result of this current environment, our 2022 budget will continue to deliver programs and services that are currently in place, and we'll continue to fund those programs in accordance with the general municipal levy that's been in place in the past. And we are undertaking and restructuring as we step through this process of what the new regulations are, how they're panning out. Next slide. In terms of the second major uncertainty created by COVID, it's had some interesting effects. We did have a huge drop in our conservation area revenue in 2020, but it has just skyrocketed in 2021, and it's doing very well, and may exceed even our 2019 levels, just barely, but certainly we went from about 9.5 million in 2019 to about 6.5 million in 2020, back up to 9.5 million. So it's it's where people are getting out and about more. It has had a negative impact though on our environmental education program. We are not delivering a day camp program. We are not delivering off ad hoc community educational environmental education sessions. And our school contracts have been contracted as the schools also try to deal with COVID and how to manage it. We've certainly had incremental costs related to COVID, but they've sort of settled down and are manageable, but they are in the range of a couple $100,000. But we have discretionary spending that has been has declined in the nature of travel and staff development and those type of activities that we have a lot more face-to-face involved. Overall, our budget is right now, the draft that went to the board at the end of September is about $31 million compared to $32 million last year. But when we break these out into the three basic categories, our operating budget is going up 2.5% with cost of living increases. Our capital budget's kind of flat, but that is expected to change as we have carry forward projects. I'll speak to that momentarily. And special projects, yes, at this time, we're just doing estimates, and we've got some big project areas where we still have to refine our amounts that will eventually be incorporated. And I'll speak to each of these three categories. So Sam, next slide. The operating budget is almost 26 million. As I said, we will continue to deliver the programs we have been, our dams, our flood forecasting, our planning regulations, managing our lands in general, operating our conservation areas, which are over half of our self-generated revenue, or about a quarter of our overall programs. Environmental education is continued to be delivered, and we have corporate services and communications. Our capital budget is at about 4 million, is primarily for our water control structure and our conservation areas. And basically they're almost split right now, but I do anticipate for them to increase. A lot of conservation area, significant dollar amounts in our conservation areas capitals were not implemented by the end of this year. There's certainly some issues with pricing and RFPs and the supply chain, et cetera. So they'll continue to be carried forward, and they're funded with the revenue from the conservation area itself. Next slide, please. Our special projects, what's important to note there is sits at about 1.5 million right now. It has the source protection program, rural water quality, species at risk. The thing to note there is these special projects, we separate them out by virtue of not drawing on general municipal levy to fund those program areas. A big one that's in progress, and we'll be finalizing the dollars, is there's a lot of floodplain mapping projects going on where either we're getting government funding or we're choosing to, we're able to use some of our reserves to help subsidize, to offset, to match the government funding and not have to go to ask for additional levy to fund floodplain management, floodplain mapping. So in general, our distribution of revenue is about 40% municipal levy and almost 50% self-generated, to just give you a bit of perspective. And finally, our levy right now, we're proposing to increase it by 2.5%, which is in line with what we've had in recent years. And because of apportionment and how the government allocates that levy amongst the various municipalities, Wellington's is going up 2.8%, slightly over the overall average, from 53,744 to 55,274. And that is and finally, another way of looking at our levy that we quote is what is the per capita levy. We have about 1 million people in the watershed, and that translates to about $11.22 per person in the watershed of levy dollars. And that's our formal part of our presentation, and take questions.
Just thank you, Sonia and Samantha. a lot of numbers to look at and kind of digest in a short time, but it does give a very quick overview of what we're expecting in 2022. And I don't think they've maybe convinced you of the work or the work that's been downloaded by the provincial government in terms of dealing with all of the programs that we currently administer and how they're going to fit in under the new structure, which I think is still scheduled to take place in 2024, start of 2024. So a lot of staff time has been spent there, and like most other organizations, our meetings have all been online. We have not had an in-person meeting for a year and a half now, a little over a year and a half. So that does entail more organizing and different ways of communicating too. So it's been interesting, but I think like all of you, we have adjusted and been able to accomplish most of the things we've hoped we'd accomplish over that period of time. The one area that's been the hardest or the most difficult to do anything with has been our education programs in the parks and in the resource centers, where students are just not allowed to go out and participate. And so that program has really been wound down. And I think it's being reevaluated right now in terms of how we reinstitute that and what it's going to look like, especially with the changes that are happening with COVID. We don't know when it's going to be back to the type of program we were able to offer in the past. So certainly any questions you have, I'm sure one of us will be willing to tackle them. Another one of my big concerns with the government, the regulations, is just the fact that they have taken back the right to overrule conservation authorities' recommendations under the Planning Act. If there's if anything is challenged, the government can now step in, and we're not even sure if conservation authorities will be able to attend or defend the recommendations. So kind of a backward step in my mind when you're dealing with environmental issues and everybody's talking about climate change, and then all of a sudden some of these decisions are going to become political rather than decisions based on science. So hopefully we can reconcile some of those differences before we get too far down that road. Any questions? Steve, if you have, oh, I'm sorry, Andy, Mayor Lennox, you go ahead and run it from there, and you can decide who you want to address it to.
Well, Bruce, I think I'll go to Steve because I did see his hand up.
Thanks, Bruce, and through you, Andy. Thank you, Sam, Sonia, and Bruce for this presentation. It's good to see the budget out, and I know you've been working under massive constraints. I sit on the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority, so I know the pains and tribulations that you've been going through. So again, thanks for this budget presentation. I guess my one question is, and I just had this over the weekend actually, and it's all about this area, like Ward 4, or I guess I should say Wellington North and Bellwood, the issues with the snowmobile clubs not being able to use the trails that we're now going to put $55,000 into, which I know is pennies. We do the same with Maitland and Saugeen. But to have those trails and not be able to use them is a question that I've been asked, like I said, just this weekend, and I'd like to be able to give the people in our area a solid answer. And I know just from talking a bit about this with Mike, that the Conestoga Club has opened again, and those trails are open over in that area in Mapleton, and I'm wondering how long it'll be, I guess, till Wellington North and Bellwood, which I think is called District 9. When will those trails be accessible for, like, even ATVers and some of the snowmobile clubs?
Thanks, Steve. A good question, and it's something that as a board, and I know as staff too, we've been struggling with the last 2 years, how we can make this happen and keep all the lawyers happy and keep our insurance rates at an acceptable level that to add or to take on any of that added risk. And I'm going to turn it over to Samantha because she's closer to the negotiations and the real issues that they're trying to resolve than I am. So Samantha, if you could answer that one or give them some of our background anyway, please.
Thank you, Bruce. Through you, Mr. Mayor. In terms of the negotiations, we, for the last 2 years, have been actively talking with the District 9 and the Ontario Federation of Snowmobilers as well. Part of the concern, again, comes down to insurance and liability. We were able to negotiate, and I guess part of the tricky part too is we negotiate with the manager and the OFSC, but then the specifics have to be in the details in terms of the roles and responsibilities have to be negotiated with each individual club. So part of the reason why the Conestoga one was able to move forward is because most of the trail connections were exclusively snowmobile trails. There weren't additional multi-use trails that were, actually there's no multi-use trails that are included in the stretch where the Conestoga club has. And that's a big issue from GRCA standpoint, but also from the snowmobile, the insurance standpoint. We're still talking with the other, because I think there's about 4 other clubs too that were impacted as well. And we're slowly working our way in discussions with those as well. But basically the reason why the Conestoga section was able to move forward, and I'm not sure if we've actually signed yet with the club themselves, but we've at least come to an agreement with the OFC and their insurance in terms of liability for the areas is basically because they're either exclusive snowmobile trails or they're trails that aren't used by other patrons during the winter months. So that was the big distinction for Conestoga.
Go ahead, Steve. Thanks.
If I can keep going, not to put you on the spot, Smith, I don't know if you've kind of answered my question, but I know that the GRCA is the only CA in Ontario that is having this issue.
I'm not so sure about that. I know talking with some of our colleagues near the Ottawa area, there's similar concerns in terms of liability and risk. So I'm not sure if they've re-signed with their snowmobile clubs yet or not. But I don't think it's exclusive just to the GRCA.
All right, so then I guess what, sorry, if I can continue, Mayor Lennox, what can I tell the people in my area and in Bellwood?
That we're
going forward, what can we do to get this back open and have the trails open?
Well, it's discussions with the OFC that we have right now. So the District 9 manager is part of that, and we're continuing to have those discussions with District 9. And we just, as Bruce mentioned as well, we did just take a report to the board last month, which identifies some of the justification in terms of the recommendation to support a new contract with the Conestoga Club. I think the tricky part in Bellwood is that one of the main connections is the rail trail, which is a multi-use year-round trail, which is part of the challenge in terms of managing other users with snowmobile on the same trail. So it's something that we're still negotiating. Both sides are still at the table. We're talking it through, but it is a complicated issue on a number of levels as well.
Any other questions? Lisa, go ahead.
On the revenue side of things, you had spoken about how revenue had gone down. It's gone back up because people know what we already know, and it's great to be outside and want to be outside and all that kind of stuff. As someone who's been camping like extensively for decades and has been everywhere, kind of now it's like winning the lottery to kind of get a campsite. I literally have my phone set for next week. Ontario Parks reservations opens for the May long weekend, and my phone will beep. And I know it's a delicate balance, but is there any capacity to expand and build on any of that with either extra campsites or extra trails or something like that to further develop this, but not overdevelop what we have so it's still attractive?
I can answer that if Bruce, unless Bruce, you have anything you want to add first?
No, go ahead, Samantha.
Okay.
And if there's anything else, I can make a comment at the end, but it's the only thing I would say up front is that, and you can verify this, but I know we've had to restrict or limit the campsites just to keep distances that are required during COVID. So that will free it up a little bit, but it's amazing. I have a son and daughter-in-law that do a lot of camping too, and she's like you, Lisa. She's on the phone the minute after the reservations open and hoping she can get the places she wants. So go ahead, Samantha.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So a few things that I guess the silver lining to COVID in some of this for us, you know, our parks are very popular, and actually next to the province, we have the largest amount of campsites available in the province. One of the things that we were starting to notice with some of our parks was just figuring out that balance between capacity and impact on the environmental features. One of the things with COVID is we had to really speed up the process in terms of each of the parks figuring out what that balance is. So all of our parks, as Bruce mentioned, this year, we had capacity limits, partially to help with COVID, but also to help with minimizing the impact on some of the natural resources that we were starting to see in some of the parks. One of the things we also did last year, and I'll have to chat with our parks manager just to confirm that we're doing the same thing as we did last year, is we actually only released so many camping sites every couple of months. And again, partially that was because we weren't sure if we were going to be able, like what the changes or impacts were going to be from the province in terms of restricting numbers. But we did release our campsites availability throughout the summer rather than having I think it's the March 1st, Sonia, is the date that we typically open up for booking for all of our campsites. So I'm not sure, Sonia, if you know if the parks are looking at doing that again this year.
Yes, I believe that's still in place. And it's like, so we started at about 50%, and then some of them were incrementally increasing it, and just a huge day pass flux in and membership sales revenue in. And yeah, it's, so the thing is, they're not at full capacity. So before you even maybe decide, like I said, expand and increase your number of campsites, and as Sam said, that's very much a environmental balance discussion. We don't have all the sites open right now.
That being said, though, we have, and we're in the process of doing an evaluation. We did open up a new campground, I think about 2 years ago at Elora, one of our parks there. And, you know, the park staff are usually, I think they do a 5-year sort of lookout in terms of priorities and projects. So certainly that that'll be in. And due to the nature of some of our parks, like Wolf Lake has a lot of open space and has a large number of campsites. And then some of the other parks don't have, just due to the geographic and environmental features on their property.
Thank you. Councillor McCabe, did you have another question? You're muted, Steve.
Thanks, Andy. And yeah, I do have another quick one. Just with the, what you just said, Samantha, with the new park opening in Elora, I guess another one of our questions, or my question, sorry, and it's in my ward, is the Damascus Park that has been closed, I think, since I had brown hair. And, you know, I understand that COVID has restricted a lot of access to GRCA as much as it has with Saugeen Valley as well. We've seen a spike in use in the parks in Saugeen Valley, much as GRCA has as well. And just wondering, because that up by Damascus has been closed for quite a while. And, you know, people want to get out and people want to enjoy the nature. And was a beautiful park when I was a lot younger, and wondering if there's any glimmer of hope that that would ever be opened again.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So Damascus is certainly a beautiful spot. It is open right now. If there's a trail that goes around the system, I believe that's open so people can access it for that. Part of the reason why the park was closed, I think it was closed back in the early 1990s, was because of the inquiry that happened related to the death of the young boy. I think it was the drowning. And there were a number of recommendations that were put in there that had to be implemented in order to keep it open as a full functioning park. And I think at that time, the decision was that, you know, the costs to do that were prohibitive. I mean, it was one of the main ones was having phone access so that there was an ability for people to make a phone call to call emergencies. And I mean, since the time we have the evolution of the cell phones and those types of things, but there were actually a number of recommendations in there that would still be applicable today that we would have to look to see whether or not it's achievable in terms of reopening it for a park. I would say at this point in time, we aren't looking at opening it up as an active park again, but certainly we could see if staff can do a really high level screening. I think the challenge is going to be the cost to put the infrastructure in and the staffing to open it as a fully functioning active park.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Sherry, go ahead. You're muted.
Thanks, Andy. So just to go back to Samantha's comment there with regards to Councillor McCabe's question on Damascus Lake. So how would we get the GRCA, as Samantha has suggested, to get staff to look at that? Would that be a recommendation that Wellington North would have to pass through Bruce and staff, or can that recommendation be taken back from this meeting?
Okay.
Sorry,
process question. Yeah, do you feel comfortable addressing that one, Samantha?
Sure. Through you, Mr. Mayor, we'd be happy to go back and talk with staff, and we can follow up with the CAO. It may take us a couple of months to just kind of pull everything through, but we can certainly give a high level sort of perspective in terms of sort of staff's position. I think the next step after that would be, of course, going through the GRCA board to see if there's an appetite for that.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions?
Mayor Lennox, if there are no further councillor questions, it's Mike. I wouldn't mind just one question from a staff perspective.
Sure, Mike, go ahead. I have one, but you could go ahead.
Yeah, just wanted to thank GRCA for the information around the budget and appreciate that. Wanted to maybe delve into a little bit as it relates to the regulations in the transition period. GRCA, you guys showed kind of the breakdown of your municipal levy versus the self-generated revenue, which I think is very, very good for our council to see. But from a township perspective, part of what I assume is the mandatory program is part of the planning review that happens as it relates to planning application within GRCA sensitive areas. Do you envision any changes around that? Is that part of the conversation? Will there be implications on municipalities that are looking for review from the Conservation Authority of these growth type activities, whether it's a plan, a subdivision, site plan, things of that nature. Just wondering if there's any, this may be premature in terms of the question, but it is something that we're concerned about at a staff level.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so the mandatory regulation, which was one of the 3 regulations that was released back in October, stipulates all of the mandatory programs. And one of them is the Conservation Authority's role in planning when commenting on natural hazard aspects. So that's the flood management, soil erosion, basically the regulatory function that we have, the comments that we would provide from that perspective, and it would continue to be funded by the general levy. The non-mandatory, or the other 2 categories that Sonia was referencing to, planning does fall into that section as well, probably into the category 2, which would be any comments that the GRCA would make on behalf of the municipality regarding natural heritage components of the planning. Depending on the municipalities, I mean, we have 22 participating municipalities in our watershed, and we have a number of MOUs with both our participating, so our levy paying municipalities, and with some of the upper or the lower tier, whoever's responsible for planning. And those agreements currently don't have any financial component to it, but they clearly identify the roles and responsibilities that the GRCA has versus the municipalities. Right now, we're commenting on both. So the change that you would see under the new budgeting framework for 2024 is that we would still comment on the natural hazard side, but we'd have to get into an MOU with the participating municipality to deliver on the natural heritage side of the planning aspect.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? So I just had a question myself, and this, again, it maybe information needs to evolve to fully understand some of this too, because it relates to the new regulations, and that is on some of those non-mandatory programs, would it be up to the Conservation Authority to come to each municipality, and each municipality would then decide whether or not they wish to participate in it? And if so, then if there's a program that falls into that category and a majority of municipalities across the watershed want to participate in it, does that mean that everybody needs to participate in it? Or is it on an a la carte type of approach to the non-mandatory programming?
So through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so in terms of the non-mandatory programs and services, as Sonia alluded to, there's the 2 different categories. So the municipal led would be the category 2 that required the memorandum of understanding with the municipalities. And then there's the category 3, which are the GRCA board decided programs. And those would include the park operations, our cottage lap program, which are generally funded through our self-generated revenue. So in terms of those category 2, there is the ability for the municipality to see the suite of programs and services and the costs that are allocated to delivering those programs, and decide which programs they want to opt into or opt out of. In terms of the GRCA, and I would just caution that you might see a bit of a difference between the way in which each CA categorizes the category 2 and the category 3, just because our revenue generation is different depending on which CA you're dealing with. But generally speaking, the GRCA in many of the municipalities that I've touched base with, in terms of the programs that would fall into the category 2, are supportive of those programs and services. I think, there may be a couple programs that some municipalities moving forward may not want to participate in. That being said, we are looking at all of the programs and services, and we'll be sending that information out to the respective municipalities towards the end of February, which would start that discussion.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, just a couple of comments too, and I think when you think through this, it could become very complex if some municipalities want in for half of a year or for 1 year or 2 years, and then you're renegotiating, well, hopefully not every year in terms of who's in and who's out of some of the programs that are being offered. But I think that's what going to take a lot of time for staff and in consultation with all the municipalities to see how we can best fit that all together. So it's there's a lot of work ahead yet before we get to 2024, but hopefully we can reach some sort of an agreement where it's not just going to be a paperwork nightmare trying to coordinate and keep track of all of these. And another question, Mr. Mayor, remember the issue that Jamie had when we were dealing with his permit application, and there was a number of digits under North Wellington, or Wellington North, I'm sorry, that was different from what the GRCA website was asking for. Did you resolve that one? I didn't fully understand it, but I didn't know if you were dealing with it at the municipal level or something I was supposed to take back to GRCA.
I've had some further discussions with particularly county planning staff, because they look after the mapping, but it still remains unresolved. So, and mostly that's on me, Bruce, in that I haven't got around to getting some of that worked out. But I know the landowner did proceed with a permit application. I think the permit was granted, if I remember correctly. And it's not as immediately urgent, but the landowner does want to continue to work to get it resolved. So stay tuned, I guess is my answer.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Okay, that's great. So thank you, Bruce, Samantha, Sonia, for joining us today and sharing that information with us. We very much appreciate it. And I want to wish you a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to all of you.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Happy holidays. Thank you. Bye.
Okay, next up, we have our own budget presentation. I see Adam's popped up, and you're going to share all the good news with us today, right, Adam?
Happy to do so, Mayor Lennox. If you just bear with me for one moment as I get my screen situated here.
Okay.
Trust that is being shared now. So good afternoon, Mayor and members of Council. Pleased to be here to present the revised draft 2022 budget as prepared by staff on behalf of the Township of Wellington North. Looking at the levy funded operations for the Township into 2022, staff are proposing a 4.86% budget increase, which is being proposed without contributions to or from reserve funds or contributions to capital. This represents an increase in levy proceeds of approximately $254,000. And as you can see in this slide, is segmented into assessment growth of 1.48% and levy increase of 3.38%. I've prepared the operating budget comparison between 2021 and 2022, stripping out key items to provide a neutral comparison between years. Of note, no contributions to or from reserve and reserve funds have been incorporated, and no contributions to the capital program have been entertained. Lastly, revised interfunctional transfers for 2022 have been implemented. However, no material differences are being proposed. Looking at the operating budget by FIR category and beginning with the general government segment, you will note that the council segment increase is largely attributed to a new line item being added to support continued volunteer engagement of approximately $10,000. And administration is up sharply to accommodate an additional resource to support asset management initiatives and 2022 election costs, which when fully loaded will be supported by a transfer from reserves. When looking at the protection services segment, Wellington North Fire Services expenses are up to support specialized software licensing costs. contract dispatch services, and increases in interfunctional transfer allocations. Conservation Authority budget has been updated to include budget inputs received from the SPCA since the previous iteration and maintains anticipated increases from our remaining CA partners. Protective inspection and control revenues are up based on anticipated increases to permitting revenues and partially offset by increased wage and benefit costs associated with the onboarding of a new building inspector. And bylaw enforcement costs have increased from the prior iteration to accommodate additional anticipated expenses relative to the shared services agreement with the City of Guelph for 2022. In these next three segments, you will note that roads expenses are up marginally and are largely driven by contracted expense increases for dust control, marketplace cost pressures for materials, and township-wide cost pressures. Most notably in that area is insurance. Parks and Recreation expense increases are largely driven by interfunctional transfer allocation changes, wage and benefit increases, programs cost pressures for cleaning and maintenance, and township-wide cost pressures, again, revolving around insurance and hydro. And lastly, when looking at the planning and development segments, you will see no material changes are being proposed. So in aggregate, you will note that the total anticipated operating expense increase of $254,000, or as previously noted, a 4.86% operating budget increase. Building on the operating budget discussion, reserve and reserve fund net transfers are being proposed to maintain alignment with policy and fund 2022 election requirements. Year over year, net taxation reserve contributions are down due to the elections transfer and reduction based on the 2021 organic growth figures. However, are up overall due to reduced debt servicing costs in the wastewater segment and additional contributions from the water services segment. So being proposed for 2022 is a fully loaded 2.5% net tax levy increase for the Township of Wellington North. This is inclusive of net transfers and contributions to the capital program. The proposed levy increase is down significantly from the previous iteration and is largely facilitated by the utilization of reserve and reserve funds to accommodate the proposed capital projects for the 2022 calendar year. As you can see, contribution to the capital program levy is up 5.6% from prior year, however, down from 2020 levels. And distribution of tax levy dollars remains relatively static when looking at contributions to the service verticals. When looking at the proposed budget impact on typical property types and average assessments thereof in Wellington North, we anticipate an increase on the average residential single-family dwelling to be in the vicinity of $31 at the net 2.5% levy increase rate. Contrasting this with other modeled rates and projections, keeping all else equal, we'll see that at 1.5%, the increase would be $18.53 on the average tax bill. 3.5% would yield a $43 increase, and at 4.5%, the increase would be in the vicinity of $55. Corresponding amounts in terms of the increase in levy dollars raised at the various increase amounts are projected to be 1.5% would be $233,000, 2.5%, $311,000, 3.5% would be $389,000, and at 4.5%, the levy increase would be $467,000. If factoring in the proposed operating increase of $202,000 inclusive of net reserve transfers, this would suggest that the following contributions to the capital program would be available via various rate increases. At 1.5%, about $31,000. At 2.5% would be $109,000. 3.5%, $187,000. And at 4.5% would be $265,000. In terms of historical trending, the township from 2014 through 2020 had seen increasing property values and conversely decreasing tax rates for residents. However, since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, the pause of the provincial reassessment scheduled in 2020, township property values have plateaued, resulting in the need to increase tax rates to support increased operating pressures. A trend which is likely to continue with the province maintaining current assessment values, which are predicated on January 1, 2016 values for the 2022 and 2023 calendar years. So when looking at the 2022 capital plan in aggregate and in comparison to prior years, we see that the total program being proposed is very similar to last year in scale and down sharply from the high water mark of 2019. However, distribution between the service segments is slightly different. From a funding perspective, in this iteration, there is significantly more reliance on the utilization of reserve and reserve funds as a funding source over the previous version. However, utilization of same is still down from prior year. Additionally, since the preparation of this iteration, the township has been advised of its OCIF allocation for 2022, which is in the vicinity of $1.9 million. This is up significantly from the 2021 allocation and in line with indications from the fall economic statement. So opportunity does exist within this allocation to reduce utilization of reserve fund dollars while maintaining the proposed capital program without it impacting the proposed levy increase for 2022. Looking now at the 2022 capital program in detail, the council directed projects are largely carried forward from 2021. The Wells Street extension remains contingent upon development influence. The Arthur BIA streetscaping is largely complete, but still requires allocation of project costs, which are still trickling in. And the Mount Forest Pool project cost represents detailed design only, and its funding source has been identified as the tax rate stabilization reserve based on previous budget discussions. Incomplete 20 and 20 IT initiatives are being carried forward for 2022 and focus on continued IT initiatives for the township, namely contingency dollars to facilitate recommendations from the IT service delivery review conducted in 2020. Development-driven projects are all 2021 carry forwards and are being displayed here for council information, but remain funded from prior years. The administration group is proposing 2 projects. The Mount Forest Downtown Wi-Fi project is a straight carry forward from 2021, and the work order management system is being proposed for 2022 to facilitate continued maturation of the township's asset management practices as recommended in the 2021 asset management plan update. Building and property are proposing 2 new projects for 2022, those being the acquisition of a pickup truck and the replacement of the flat roof for the Gene Weber Reading Room. Wellington North Fire Services is proposing 4 projects. 2 are continuations of multi-year projects previously approved by council, those being bunker gear and the fire hose replacement projects, as well as 2 new projects for 2022, those being site planning for the Mount Forest Fire Hall and the acquisition of a new pickup truck. From a fleet perspective, we see 2 carry forwards from 2021, those being the replacements of the 2007 Volvo and 2010 pickup trucks. These items have been ordered but have not yet arrived. The remainder of the projects are those being proposed for 2022 and include the replacement of the fuel tanks at works yards, installation of dash cameras and radio replacements for fleet vehicles, and other replacement equipment purchases. 3 new bridge projects are being proposed for 2022, those being Side Road 3 East, Line 6, and Side Road 13. Reconstruction design projects continue for 2022, but also include 2 new additions, those being Fergus Street North between Durham and Birmingham, and Preston Street North between Smith and Domville. Full reconstruction projects for 2022 have been identified as Domville between Conestoga and Preston and Queen Street East in Mount Forest, for which the township has secured a connecting link grant to partially fund. Additionally, the township has submitted an application for the continuation of Smith Street in Arthur and will be contingent upon grant approval. 2022 works on this project would be limited to detailed design with construction slated for 2023. Gravel-based rebuild projects have been identified as Side Road 13 and Side Road 9 West. It is anticipated that these 2 projects will require 3 years to complete. However, what is being proposed herein is only the 2022 estimated contributions. The 2022 Rural Resurfacing Program is being directed to 3 projects, those being Side Road 5 West, Line 12, and Side Road 7 East. The 2022 urban paving program is comprised of 6 projects, including London Road North, Albert Street, Birmingham Street East, Church Street North, Durham Street East, and Preston Street South. Other transportation services include a mix of carry forward and new projects for 2022. The pedestrian safety measures, Mount Forest Drive turn lane, and works yard upgrades are all carry forwards from 2021. And the newly proposed projects are the sidewalk construction projects for Princess Street and bordering the Victoria Cross Public School, 3 assessment studies to aid in the township asset management data maturation initiatives, and a new addition, the assessment and concept design of a new works yard in Arthur, as discussed at our previous budget deliberation session. Sanitary sewer capital works for 2022 include contributions to the previously mentioned engineering design projects. Additionally, contributions to the reconstruction projects on Queen Street East in Domville, as well as some independent sewer projects, including project works being suggested at the treatment plants and pumping stations presented by Aqua, similar to previous years, and a couple of studies, those being the wastewater treatment plant blower study and the Mount Forest wastewater treatment plant re-rating, rounding out the sanitary capital ask for 2022. Waterworks will also see contributions to the similar engineering design projects previously discussed. And contributions to the reconstruction projects on Queen Street East and Domville are also being proposed for the waterworks segment, as well as some independent water projects carried forward from 2021, including the water supply study in Arthur, the allocation of costs pertaining to George and Smith Street in Arthur, and the Mount Forest standpipe rehabilitation. In addition to these, there are some 2022 projects, including the replacement of a valve maintenance and vac trailer, a water meter study, and the acquisition of a new pickup truck. And the Parks and Recreation segment is suggesting the continuation of a number of multi-year projects, namely signage, trail development, the Brent Barnes Memorial Skate Park, the Arthur Ball Diamond safety netting, and the completion of the Red Clay Diamond in Mount Forest. Being proposed for 2022 are the rehabilitation efforts at the Arthur Community Center, for which a grant has been submitted through the Federal Green and Inclusive Community Building Program, and will be contingent upon successful acceptance to that program. However, Council should be aware that a recent structural inspection has identified areas of the community center roof that will require attention. The need to pursue restorative action in the near future, even if unsuccessful with the GICB grant funding, is possible. Additionally, I would draw attention to the Arthur Community Center works as a multi-year project, with the 2022 contribution only representing the perceived 2022 requirement. The total project cost is estimated to be just north of $3 million, with total township contributions estimated to be in the vicinity of $620,000 if successful with the GICB grant. The Campbell Devore Park accessible playground has been identified for 2022, as have the replacement of an ice resurfacing machine. Noted here is that staff have investigated electric replacement options, however, are not recommending proceeding with an electric unit at this time. Mount Forest playground surface enhancements to the Mount Forest Fairgrounds, and the development of a trails master plan. So thank you, and happy to field any questions that Council may have relative to the content presented herein.
Okay, questions from Council? Steve, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor Lennox, and through you, and I guess to Mike and Adam, obviously, had a couple of discussions this weekend with some residents, and had a kind of an interesting question that I couldn't answer, and it was this, so I wrote it down. Is there a break-even point with the large amount of housing that is going on in our township and that is projected to be going on in our township to kind of offset tax increases by having a bigger tax base to draw off of when all these houses are built over the next couple of years? Does that kind of make a little bit of sense, or can you make sense of it, I suppose, Adam?
Go ahead, Adam.
Steve, and through you, Mayor Lennox, if I may. Certainly a difficult question to pin down, just because certainly we don't know the growth projections and what that would mean in terms of extension of municipal services. Well, I can mention that with increased growth and taxable assessment, the township is able to increase its levy funded revenues. However, with that growth, there's typically an extension of service required, which does have offsetting expenditures associated with it. Additionally, the township is consistently subject to inflationary and market pressures, which drive overall operating costs higher. I would comment that in the last few years, the township has been able to keep levy increases in line with those inflation marks, while leveraging organic growth figures and revenues to offset service extensions and contributions to our reserve funds. I'm not sure if that sufficiently answers your question.
Yeah, I think it has. Thanks, Adam. And if I can continue, Mayor Lennox?
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
It seemed to be a great weekend for budget talks, because I got another one for you as well, Adam, not to put you on the spot again. And I've had this conversation with people that live in Mount Forest and in Arthur, and then people that live out in the country in a non-ag property. And there's a sense that perhaps rural properties, non-ag rural properties, their property taxes are higher than what you would see in town, whether it's Mount Forest or Arthur, compared to maybe not Kenilworth, but outside of Kenilworth or outside of either of our urban centers. And again, just a rural non-ag property. And they seem to always think that the rural properties somehow subsidize the urban property taxes. And I realize that it's set by MPAC and land values that they set. Is there some sort of a way you can explain that a little bit, or?
Go ahead, Adam.
Happy to take a stab at that, Councillor McCabe, and through you again, Mayor Lennox. From a property assessment lens, a single family dwelling for residential purposes is taxed at the same rate in either an urban or a rural setting. However, in an urban setting with water and sewer connections, the urban dwelling would be subject to water and sewer utilization fees, where they wouldn't be in a rural setting. The notion being that all residents or residential property owners have access to the same tax-funded services offered by the municipality, albeit some more accessible than others given geographic proximity to those services. I would also add that typically similar properties are assessed differently when in an urban or a rural setting. And while taxed at the same rate, the urban resident is likely to pay more in municipal taxes than that of their rural counterpart when you consider the assessment values of a similar property in either one of the settings. And as you've alluded to, the assessment is largely driven by the MPAC assessment, not necessarily municipal staff.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Okay. Other questions? Sherry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just have a couple of questions. The first one is related to Wellington North Fire Service. I see in the budget there's $50,000 for a fire hall construction site plan. Can somebody refresh me on that? I know I wasn't at the last meeting, but I did go through the paperwork, and also the need for I'd be amiss if I didn't say all fleet that's in the budget. The need for another pickup truck for the fire department. I don't know if somebody can expand on that. I know there's a couple of other fleet ones, and if somebody can tell me what the priority level is on fleet. Thank you.
Chris, do you want to tackle those?
Yeah, absolutely. Through you, Mayor Lennox, I can start with this one. The Mount Forest Fire Hall plan is to start the planning towards looking at building a new fire hall in Mount Forest. We've come to know that the fire hall is not meeting our needs, and we're busting at the seams more or less. We don't have any shower facilities at the fire hall. The concrete floor out in the bay floors is breaking apart, and we're outgrowing it. The bunker gear room is very, very small. There's not enough room in there, and with our decontamination guidelines and that are now out and that we have to follow, there's a lot more room that we need for that, as well as just for parking the trucks and all that kind of stuff. So we're just starting the planning to see how a new fire hall could fit on that lot and what a conceptual drawing would look like. And that's as far as we're going to go, and so that we can show council what it would look like on that site, and if that site is even possible. And we might even explore the feasibility of a joint fire hall, public works garage on that site as well, where we could share facilities like wash bays and classrooms and stuff like that. That's also what we're exploring. So to answer your question, Councillor Brooke, on that, that's just an exploratory phase so that we can present options to council and say, you know, this is what we're thinking, and moving forward in the future for when that comes up with our development charge chart of when we're going to replace that fire hall. So the pickup truck for us, and I'll let Matt talk about the pickup truck for us. So the truck that Marco drives is 7 years old. So we're replacing it. But what our plan is again, because of the new decontamination guidelines, we have to wash all of our equipment very thoroughly now because of the new cancer regulations and that are out in the fire service. So we need a pickup truck available at the hall to be able to go out to various scenes that maybe we're not at, or that come about for different reasons, that we can put hose, air packs, our bunker gear, all that in the truck to bring back to properly wash and that. So we have to decontaminate the firefighters at the scene. They disrobe their garments, they put it in the back of a truck in bags or whatever, and then we bring it back, and then we thoroughly wash it in our machines. And we do the same for hose and air packs and that. So for example, our fire yesterday, the one pickup truck we had was overflowing, that we could have used two with the amount of equipment we had off, that we had to bring back and clean and disinfect. So that's what that's going to be used, as well as because we're getting so many recruits every year to boost our numbers. They're driving all over the county for training, and that vehicle will be available for them to be able to take it to different training sessions in different areas. Instead of paying the mileage, they're putting their gear in the back of a proper pickup truck and going to the training. So it's replacing an old truck, but then keeping the old one in the fleet that will probably get another 10, 12 years out of it to be in the fire hall for usage, like I explained there.
Did you have further questions, Sherry? Just remind me, did you have further inquiries?
So this pickup truck is going to be expensed fully by the Township of Wellington North, so it will be utilized within our municipality?
Correct. Absolutely.
Did that answer your...
Nothing further at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Other questions from members of council? Go ahead, Dan.
I guess, yeah, just back to the truck, the pickup truck with the fire department. So we had two trucks, right?
Correct, yes.
And now we're getting another one, so that'll be 3 trucks?
Correct.
So we're gonna have 3. Go ahead, sorry, Chris.
No, it's okay. I didn't mean to cut you off, Council. So there'll be one in the Arthur Fire Hall, one in the Mount Forest Fire Hall, and one that Marco, Deputy Chief Giudotti, will be driving. And that'll be the way the 3 pickups are deployed.
Okay, all right. So and the other question I had was, I'm a little disappointed to hear that we're not investigating, or maybe we have investigated, but that we're not moving forward with the, or taking a better look, I guess, at the electric ice resurfacing machine. I think this is a perfect opportunity to show the community that we're looking forward and we're being a little proactive here. So I guess I need an explanation as to why we're not moving forward with that.
Okay, who wants to take that one? Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Lennox, and through you to Councillor Yake. Staff did get pricing related to an electric Zamboni, and the conversation internally really was that if we want to go an electric vehicle route, I think from a staff standpoint, we see maybe a pickup truck as a lower risk option. One of the concerns with the Zamboni being electric is if on a Saturday night it doesn't get plugged in, we kind of forego the next, like a Sunday, having that vehicle available to us. And I think the technology is maybe a little bit more proven related to pickup trucks or just automotive vehicles. But that was the conversation that was had internally. And I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but the numbers were something like $100,000 for what's proposed and maybe about $150,000 for an electric option.
All right.
Did you follow up with that, Dan?
No.
Okay. Other questions? Comments? Sherry, go ahead.
Well, while we're on recreation, just wondering about the accessible playground at Campbell Devore Park. Are we looking at doing that replacement ourselves? Are we looking to reach out to some of our partners within the community? Grants, is there a grant application being applied for that particular project? As I see, we're looking at accessible playground equipment, playground resurfacing replacements, and fairground enhancements over at the Mount Forest Fairgrounds. Are we looking at any kind of grant application or partnerships to offset some of these costs?
Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Lennox, and through you to Councillor Burke. I guess the budget, the way it's been proposed, the thought was with the Campbell Devore Park that it would be a RFP similar to last year. It currently doesn't factor in a grant application, but township staff are always keeping our eyes open for grant applications. And the fairgrounds enhancements, again, right now, those would be, the ask is for them to be funded by tax levy, but certainly staff keep an eye open for grant applications if those types of projects fit.
Okay, thank you. I guess my question is to try and, my questions are to try and see if we can get it a little bit closer to 2%, the levy it a little closer to 2%. In reviewing the last council meeting, I took that that this council at that meeting was trying to get the levy closer to 2%. And that's just, I'd like to see it a little bit closer to 2% myself.
Okay, other questions, comments? Okay, and I would comment too that we did get a recent update with regard to the OCIF that we will be getting an additional contribution than was included in this draft of the budget. And I think staff have, at this point, planned to use that for replenishing some of the reserves. If council wants to make adjustments to the levy increase, certainly that does provide some additional flexibility if we should so wish to do so. Without interfering with capital projects, I guess is what I'm getting at. So I throw that out there for discussion if there's a desire to do so. Steve, go ahead.
I guess I would have to see what kind of numbers would be, what the numbers would be if we did apply that, I guess.
Yeah, and I don't think that we would have to apply all of it. I mean, it's a significant contribution. I think Adam can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's an additional $900,000 that we can put towards capital renewal through that enhanced OCIF. Adam, go ahead.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Lennox. Just as a point of clarification, yes, this iteration of the budget would suggest $900,000 utilization of OCIF funding. Our funding that was predicated on what our expectations were prior to the fall economic statement, not knowing certain what our allocation would be. With the notification now coming through, our allocation is $1.9 million, which does open up significant opportunities for increased utilization of that allocation and kind of stemming the amount that is in this iteration is funded through reserve and reserve funds. So if it is council's wish to come back at 2%, we could certainly offset the utilization of reserve and reserve funds and the OCIF contribution while still hitting that target without having a material impact on the additional contributions from reserve and reserve funds.
Thanks, Adam. Go ahead, Dan.
Well, I guess I'd like to say, I mean, the OCIF funding increase was certainly welcome. There's no question about that. So I'd like to see a couple options from Adam in regards to, you know, just a couple of different options in ways that could be used, whether it's all used or half of it's used. You know, I think that's what I'd like to see. I think it's pretty tough to sit here and just kind of guess at what that number might be. So like I say, it's a welcome announcement. So if you can put together a couple of different options, Adam, then we can go from there.
Yeah, I would caution you, Councillor Yake, a little bit around some of that, in that you know, we can put together all kinds of different options, but I think really what we're talking about here is, you know, what we put into reserves and what we use OCIF funding for. It's really for capital expenditures. We know we've got lots of capital renewal work to do. We know we've got lots of growth related capital work to do. We know we have bridges, as an example, that are in needing of replacement and so on. I think our staff are at the position right now where we can't really take on additional capital projects with our current staff capacity, and that we could go ahead and spend all that money, or we can put it in reserve and find a way to spend more in the future. And I think that was the direction that staff were going to take. Now, every reduction we create to the levy reduces the amount that will be available for future capital projects, no matter how we slice this. So I think the question is, what's the right balance? Is the balance that we give taxpayers a bigger break right now, or is the balance that we, you know, weigh more heavily towards making sure that we don't give them a bigger hit in the future, because we know we have all these capital needs. You know, we went through the asset management process, and we know that there's significant needs there that will need to be funded. So it's just a question of balance, and I think it's up to us as members of council to decide what that balance ought to be. And so, you know, staff can give us options, but I think we need to be a bit more prescriptive about what kind of options we want to look at to get there, I guess is my concern. So if you know, I heard Councillor Burke say quite clearly she'd like to see the levy requirement closer to 2%, and I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I think she's saying that she'd like to, you know, she thinks it's proper balance to, you know, charge a little bit less right now and work towards, continuing to work towards capital funding in the future. And I'll give you a chance to say on your own, Sherry.
Thank you very much. Yes, that's exactly where I was going with it, Mayor Lennox. I think that if we can take some of that money to offset that 0.5%, I would be more comfortable with that. I think that, in the last couple of years, because we have rollover projects, we continue to bite off more than we can necessarily chew. So I don't think we need to increase the number of capital projects that we've got going on. But I also think we need to consider that we are still in COVID times. Times are getting tougher for a lot of people within our community. I see a lot of it every day. And I think it's important to have some balance. I think we are in the last few years, we have really nibbled away at capital projects. And if we can take some of that extra funding and offset what's being presented here this afternoon with some of those dollars, and also put those the rest of those dollars into future capital projects. So setting those dollars aside into reserves.
Okay. Other questions, comments? So I'm Councillor Yake has asked for options. I mean, what do others want to look at? Do we want to, what kind of options do we want to look at, or do we want to take Councillor Burke's recommendation and just saw off the 0.5% to try to get to a balance that she's comfortable with? Go ahead, Dan.
I'm okay with Councillor Burke's suggestion. I guess we just need to know what that number is, really, or maybe it doesn't matter. I guess the number doesn't matter. I guess as long as we get down to 2%. So, I guess that's what I was trying to figure out. What was that number going to be if that's what we were trying to do, is to get to 2%, and then we can put the rest in reserves, like you suggested. So it doesn't really matter.
Well, I think probably Adam can tell us what 0.5% of the levy is fairly quickly. So not to put you on the spot, Adam, but can you give us that number?
Certainly, through you, Mayor Lennox. I believe our levy last year was $7.9 million. So $79,000 would be your percentage point. Looking at half of that, you'd be probably just shy of $40,000 would be the additional contribution from the OCIF to fund that gap.
That was easy. That's all I wanted to know. I guess I could have figured that out.
So just for the record, though, we're not funding operations from OCIF. The OCIF is being put aside and to do capital projects. We're just taking money and shuffling it around the way we pay for the existing capital projects. Just to be clear, we're because OCIF is really geared to capital projects. Mike, go ahead.
So not to try and muddy the water on purpose around what I think I'm hearing the ask from a staff perspective is, when Adam goes through the budget, he talks about the transfer to capital. So the transfer to capital is actual levy dollars that are going towards the capital program. So what I'm hearing is that staff is being asked to look at ways to reduce that transfer so it reduces the overall levy impact by utilizing some of the OCIF dollars to get us to that 2%. And not that it's a shell game, because it's not a shell game, but it is about working around funds. So basically it reduces the amount that we can put into reserves, but it also reduces the transfer from the levy to our capital program and reduces the overall levy. So we can do that from a staff perspective if that's the direction council wants us to take. To the mayor's point, we've built up capacity within our levy over the last 5 years that more of the levy dollars go towards capital programs than they did historically. Meaning we know we have an asset deficit that we got to continue to invest in our capital program. So we've built capacity and are continuing to try to build that capacity. So by reducing that transfer to capital, again, not trying to muddy the waters, we're reducing some of that capacity going forward in the future, as Mayor Lennox has indicated. But to Councillor Yake's point, it's $40,000 and an $8 million levy. And we can do that. And you entrust staff to do that, and we will do that.
Thanks, Mike, for not muddying the water. Comments from, just hang on, Dan. I'm going to let Steve and Lisa have a say if they want to. I'll come back to you.
All right.
I'm good, Mayor Lennox. Thank you.
Okay. Lisa?
Sure, why not? I think what Councillor Burke says makes a lot of sense. You know, I was originally okay with the 2.5%, but if there's ever a time to kind of try to balance this, we're all kind of living in the here and now right now, where people are trying to get by, and $40,000 to help out with a little bit of that will still give us some money for what we've described and its settings for the future. So,
okay, thank you. Dan, I'll come back to you now.
I'll just, I'm supportive of Councillor Burke's recommendation that we get to 2%. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about 2.5. She's suggesting 2. I can support that. And I would certainly support the addition of $40,000 to make that happen. I mean, I understand what Mike's saying. It's game of give and take, but overall $40,000 to get it to Councillor Burke's recommendation is fine with me.
Okay, and yeah, I too think that these are uncertain times, and the news I'm hearing these days with regard to the new variant, the Omicron variant of COVID-19, sort of lends itself to even more uncertainty going forward. So I think I can support the recommendation too of getting things down to 2%. And I do think, we're very fortunate to have the flexibility to be able to do that, especially during these trying times. So I think I am hearing a consensus, Adam, that the final iteration of this, we're close. We're just need some fine tuning at this point. Sherry, go ahead.
Can I just ask one more question with regards to fleet?
Okay.
The vehicles that we talked about, Councillor Yake brought up the fact that we weren't getting we weren't going to get an electric ice resurfacer, but it was mentioned in conversation that we would like to try an electric pickup truck as our first adventure of electric. In this budget, are either of the fleet additions options as of electric?
Matt, I see you popped up. You want to take a stab at that?
Yep, thanks, Mayor Lennox. As proposed, those are both gasoline models that are proposed.
So can I have a follow-up question?
Absolutely.
So when do we propose in the fleet that we will start looking at electric? We're talking about putting electric, we've got several electric charging stations here. We're talking about the possibility of putting one in Kenilworth. I'm just wondering if staff has a timeline for electric vehicles.
Go ahead, Matt.
I would say as part of next year's budget, we could put forward something, but if council wishes, we could put back a pickup truck or a vehicle, make one of those electric the way it stands.
Mike, go ahead.
Through you, Mayor Lennox, Councillor Burke, I'm a supporter. I'm a proponent of making the change. The concern is that it's hard to do as kind of a one-off. You have to have the appropriate charging station to align with the vehicle. And if we're going to invest in that, then we should be investing in more vehicles. It will be, we talked about this as part of the modernization funds. And it's one of these potential items that is a rip the Band-Aid off, not sneak up on it type of, in my opinion anyways. And to be honest, brutally honest with council, I don't think we're there yet as an organization. And I'll take that feeling on myself because I'm the leader of this organization, I don't think we're prepared to make the actual change within our culture and within our environment to electric vehicles. We need to be, in my opinion, and I'll continue to work with staff and we'll continue to look for ways to do that. But knowing that council supports going in that direction is a very big, big step, because when we discussed it during the modernization funding report, there was some trepidation, I think, from both council and from staff. Hearing today that council is supportive of us making that move and ripping the Band-Aid off, I think helps facilitate the conversations with all of staff going forward, that this is a route we are going to go. And yeah, we need to make those steps. We're just not there yet, Councillor Burke. That's
okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments with regard to budget process? Okay, so just Adam, could I ask you to just walk us through the remaining steps in the process here?
Certainly, Mayor Lennox, and again through you, I believe the next steps from a staff perspective was to bring back another iteration of the budget at the January 10th meeting. And then if that is the case and council is satisfied with the 2% levy increase, we can certainly do that. If the intent is to pass the bylaw for the approved budget at that same meeting, we would need to get noticing in paper now in order to alert the public that we intend to pass a bylaw for the passing of the budget at the January 10 meeting. Absent that, we could hold the meeting on January 10th and pass a bylaw at a subsequent meeting of council.
Okay. So I guess it's up to us how quickly we want to proceed. Does anybody have thoughts or feelings about where they'd like to go? Lisa, go ahead.
I think we should just plow forward, period.
Meaning be prepared to pass the bylaw on January 10th? Okay. Steve, I saw you had your hand up.
Yep, thank you, Mayor. And I was going to say the same thing. The January 10th meeting would be great.
Okay. Councillor Burke, Councillor Yake, any concerns?
No, I also agree with that. I think that once the earlier we pass it, the more time staff has to get the appropriate RFPs, etc., out, and maybe ahead of some of our other municipalities.
Okay. Councillor Yake?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Okay, so just recognizing the times we're in with the gathering restrictions and so on, we can't go back to our usual open house prior to passing the budget, Adam. But will we give notice generally to the public that they could see the information for the budget prior to, other than, they could tune in to today's meeting and the previous one? Can we send notification out or so on that prior to passing, the public has ample opportunity to have a look? Go ahead.
Through you, I think there's opportunity to have everything posted similar to the timeframes we have in terms of the making public of the agenda. Happy to come back in front of council, do a presentation as more of a public engagement prior to the passing of the bylaw that same meeting.
Okay, and with the public notification, could we include the links to the previous meetings as well, so that if the public wants to go back and view those meetings, they could be included?
Certainly from an electronic noticing perspective, yes. We could also draw attention to that, our website and the links through the print notification as well.
I think that would be great. Okay, any other questions or comments from council? Okay, not seeing any. Again, thank you to all of staff for the efforts that have gone into the budget process. Look forward to getting on with it in 2022. So again, thank you. Okay, that finishes up our presentations for this afternoon. We'll next recess to deal with some planning meetings, public meetings. So I have a recommendation here that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North recess the December 13th, 2021 regular meeting of council for the purpose of holding a public meeting under the Planning Act for application 2574574 Ontario Inc. for a minor variance and Elvin and Rosetta Martin zoning bylaw amendments. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that recommendation, please? Moved by Steve, seconded by Sherry. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So we're in recess. We'll switch over to the Committee of Adjustment, I believe, first. Is that the one you have teed up first, Karen? Okay. So with that, I'll call the Committee of Adjustment meeting to order. This is in respect to A15/21 2574574 Ontario Inc. And ask if there's any pecuniary interest to be declared with regard to this application. I don't have any. Councillor Yake?
No.
Councillor Hearn?
No.
Councillor Burke? Okay, thanks. And Councillor McCabe, are you still with us? Okay, if he does have pecuniary interest, he can declare it at any time throughout the meeting when if he rejoins us. So we'll deal with the minutes of the previous Committee of Adjustment meeting. We have a recommendation here that the Committee of Adjustment meeting minutes of October 25th, 2021, application A13/21 be adopted as presented. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Lisa, seconded by Dan. And all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So we have our application today is A15/21. Again, this is for 2574574 Ontario Inc. The location of the subject property is described as Plan Mount Forest, part of Park Lot 4, south side of Durham Street and east side of Main Street. The subject lands are approximately 2.19 hectares in size, and the land subject to the variance is approximately 407 square meters. The location of the property is shown on the attached map in your package. And the purpose and effect of the application is to provide relief from the minimum lot area per dwelling, minimum lot area per dwelling unit on a separate lot, and minimum rear yard. The applicant is proposing to construct a semi-detached dwelling with a lot area of 407 square meters and a lot area of 202 square meters per dwelling unit and a rear yard of 5.5 meters. Other variances may be considered where deemed appropriate. How was notice given for this public meeting?
Notices were mailed to property owners within 60 meters of the subject property, as well as mailed to the applicable agencies. Signage was posted on the property on November 18th, 2021.
Okay, thank you. And do we have Matthew with us to present? There he is. Hi, Matthew.
Matthew is here, and I've also moved Brad Wilson into the meeting as well as Astrid Close.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Matthew.
Perfect, thank you. And through you, Chair, before you today is a minor variance application to provide relief from the minimum lot area per dwelling, minimum lot area per dwelling unit on a separate lot, and minimum rear yard for a semi-detached dwelling. So as I mentioned, the applicant is proposing to construct a semi-detached dwelling with a lot area of 4,381 square feet with a 5.5 rear yard setback. So the applicant has indicated that the proposed development would be designed to accommodate the lot in question, which would be geared towards affordable housing units. So with that said, planning staff have no concerns with the application, as the request is minor and meets the intent of the official plan and zoning bylaw, and I welcome any questions.
Thanks, Matthew. I see we have some correspondence listed on our agenda. Has any further correspondence been received in respect to this application?
No, nothing other than what is listed.
Okay, great. Thank you. Just notice that if anyone wishing to be notified of the decision must submit a written request to the Secretary Treasurer. And with that, I'll open the floor for any questions or comments from the applicant and or the public. Anybody wish to speak to this application? Astrid, I see you popped up. Would you like to chat about it?
Sure, I'll just say a few words briefly. Thank you so much for the opportunity. So I am the planning consultant here on behalf of Brad Wilson's numbered company for this. It's a block in an approved draft plan of subdivision. And we've been working with the local municipality and the county planners. So the original application or proposal was actually for a 3-unit townhouse that would have been 3 stories in height. That was not accepted or supported. And so what the Committee of Adjustment is reviewing today is actually a revised submission for semi-detached, so 2 units. And that's much closer to being in compliance with the zoning requirements. And it's also, because it's 2 stories, we feel it's a better fit for the neighborhood as well. So yeah, other than that, we're pleased to be here with support with planning support, and we'd be pleased to answer any questions that committee may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And anyone else like to speak to this application? Do we have anyone registered to speak to this application, Karen?
No, we do not.
Okay. Okay, then we'll move on to questions or comments from the committee. Anybody have any questions or comments?
I have no issue with this at all, Andy.
Okay, so then we'll just read the recommendation here, and then we'll have a vote on it. So that the minor variance applied for an application A15/21 for the property described as Plan Mount Forest, Park Lot 4, Southside Durham Street, and East Side Main Street, geographic town of Mount Forest, to provide the following relief. Number 1, that a reduced lot area, minimum per dwelling of 400 square meters, be permitted for a proposed semi-detached dwelling, whereas the bylaw requires 550 square meters. Number 2, that a reduced lot area, minimum per dwelling unit on a separate lot of 202 square meters be permitted for a proposed semi-detached dwelling, whereas the bylaw requires 275 square meters. And number 3, that a reduced rear yard minimum of 5.5 meters be permitted for a proposed semi-detached dwelling, whereas bylaw requires 7.6 meters. All those in favor? That's approved. Thank you very much. So the only thing left on this agenda is the adjournment. So I have a recommendation here that the Committee of Adjustment meeting minute, sorry, let me start again. That the Committee of Adjustment meeting of December 13th, 2021 be adjourned. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Steve, seconded by Sherry. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So we're adjourned from the Committee of Adjustment. We'll now move on to our public meeting for a zoning bylaw amendment. And with that, I'll call the public meeting for the zoning bylaw amendment to order. And we'll ask for any declaration of pecuniary interest. And this is regard to zoning bylaw application 26/21 for Elvin and Ruthetta Martin. I have none to declare for this. Councillor McCabe?
I have none.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Burke?
No.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hearn?
No.
And Councillor Yake?
No.
Okay, thank you. So the owner and applicant in this case is Elvin and Ruthetta Martin. The location of the subject land, the land subject to the proposed amendment is described as Division 3-4, Part Lot 18, East Owen Sound Road, Division 1, Part Lot 19, East Owen Sound Road, with a civic address of 9217 Highway 6, Kenilworth. The property is approximately 58.56 hectares in size. The purpose and effect of the proposed amendment is to rezone the property to permit a new 455.22 square meter farm equipment repair shop and permit a maximum of 4 employees on site. Additional relief may be considered at this meeting. How was notice given for this public meeting?
Notices were sent to property owners within 120 meters. as well as to the applicable agencies. Signage was posted on November 22nd, 2021. And I have just moved Mr. Martin into the meeting. He's only on by phone though.
Okay. Who do we have? Are you presenting this one as well, Matthew? Okay, so I'll turn it over to you for your presentation, please.
Great, thank you. And through you, Chair. So this application is a zoning bylaw amendment seeking to rezone the subject lands from agricultural to agricultural site specific. The applicant is seeking to establish an on-farm diversified use, particularly a 4,900 square foot farm equipment repair business. So further, as the business scales up, the bylaw would permit a maximum of 4 employees. So all in all, the application generally conforms to provincial policy as well as the official plan and zoning bylaw. Planning staff have confirmed that the area of operation will not exceed the maximum 2% of the farm. And with that said, I welcome any questions.
Okay, thanks, Matthew. Has any further correspondence been received in respect to this application? You're
yes,
muted,
yep, we've got additional comments from the Grand River Conservation Authority, and they have no objections.
Okay, thank you. Anyone wishing notice of this decision, the bylaw will be considered at the regular council meeting following the public meeting. That's today. Persons wishing notice of the passing of the bylaw must submit a written request. And with that, I'll open the floor for any questions or comments. Do we have anyone from the public or the applicant that wish to speak to this application, Karen?
Mr. Martin, I'm not sure, did you want to speak?
My husband's not home and he'll have to unmute himself if he wants to talk from his work phone.
Oh, okay. I see that. Okay, I'll move him in. Sorry, I didn't realize that that was him. Sorry. Okay, so Mr. Martin, I have moved you into the meeting now. Did you want to speak to the application?
Oh, I don't have much to say, no. Just that appreciate everybody taking time for this. It's up to you.
Okay, thank you very much. You don't have anyone else registered to speak to this, Karen?
I do not, no.
Okay, so then I'll open the floor for any questions or comments from council. Okay. I would just comment that it's good to see our agricultural industry continuing to build on its capacity for looking after the needs of local agricultural businesses. So I think this is a great use of farm property to be able to do repair on farm equipment. It's certainly something that needs to be done. It doesn't seem to break down if you don't use it, and I see lots of people using it, so I'm sure it does need some repair. With that said, we'll move to adjournment. Just a reminder that we'll be dealing with the proposed bylaw immediately following this public meeting. So the recommendation here that the public meeting of December 13th, 2021 be adjourned at 3:48 p.m. Could I have a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Steve, seconded by Sherry. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So we're adjourned from the public meeting. We'll now go back to our regular council meeting. And we'll resume our regular council meeting with the following recommendation: that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North resume the December 13th, 2021 regular meeting of council at 3:49. Did I get a mover and a seconder for that? Dan and Lisa. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So right away, we'll deal with this zoning bylaw that we just had the public meeting for. We have a recommendation here that bylaw number 121-21, being a bylaw to amend bylaw 66-01, being a zoning bylaw for the Township of Wellington North, be read a first, second, and third time and enacted. Again, this is in regard to Division 3 to 4, Part Lot 18, East Owen Sound Road, and Division 1, Part Lot 19, East Owen Sound Road, with the civic address of 9217 Highway 6 in Kenilworth. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that recommendation, please? Moved by Steve, seconded by Dan. Any discussion on that? Okay, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So we'll now move on to adoption of the council and public meeting minutes. And we have a recommendation here that the minutes of the regular meeting of council held on November 22nd, 2021, and the special meeting of council held on November 30th, 2021 be adopted as circulated. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Sherry, seconded by Lisa. Any questions, comments with regard to those minutes? Okay, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. I don't think we have any business arising from previous meetings of council, so we're on to items for consideration. So if we could select those items we'd like to have some further discussion on, that would be great. Steve, go ahead. You're muted, Steve.
Sorry, got a bit of a cough, so I have myself muted. Through you, I would like to see 1G, specifically Part 4. I don't know if you can we break it out that specifically, Karen?
Yes, we can.
Yep.
Okay, great, thank you. And then 3A, the City of Guelph pilot on page 97.
Okay. Any others, Steve?
No, that's good for me, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else have others they'd like to pull out? Sherry, go ahead.
1D.
1D, that's the BIA.
Yes, please. And 7A.
7A. Okay, that's the delegation of authority.
Yes, please.
Okay. Any others, Sherry?
No, that's all for me. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else have others they'd like to pull out? Karen, did you have?
When council's done, I have an item that we need to pull.
Okay. Mike, I saw your hand too. Is that?
Yeah, I can wait as well to give members of council some time.
Okay. Anybody else have others they'd like to pull out? Yeah, I see Lisa shaking her head. Dan, you have any?
No, I'm okay for now.
Okay. Karen, I'll give you a crack at it and then let Mike have it go.
5C, which is the report TR 2021-019, is the 2022 fees and charges bylaw updates.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Mike?
The only other one, Mayor Lennox, I thought just worth for conversation was 1G2.
Okay. Fundraising committee guidelines?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, so I'll just recap, and then if there's something we've missed, we'll have another crack at it. 1D, 1G Part 2 and Part 4, 3A, 5C, and 7A. Okay. If I missed any? All right. So we'll adopt all of the others then. So the recommendation is that all items listed under items for consideration on the December 13th, 2021 council agenda with the exception of those items identified for separate discussion, be approved and the recommendations therein be adopted. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Lisa, seconded by Steve. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So now we'll go back to 1D. This is in regard to the Mount Forest BIA annual general meeting. And we have a recommendation here that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North receive the minutes of the Mount Forest Business Improvement Association annual general meeting held on November 17th, 2021. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Sherry, seconded by Dan. And we'll open the floor for discussion. Sherry, I assume you'd like to speak to this?
Yes, please. So I just wanted to highlight this. I know there's a report that we've already passed, but I just wanted to bring to council's attention that the BIA here in Mount Forest has a really good group of people that have come together, and they've got a lot of great ideas. They had a really good turnout for their AGM. And even though the BIA, you'll see, is in good a financial situation, the levy will be unchanged for 2022, just because they have so many projects that they discussed in 2021 that didn't come to fruition, but they'd like to complete in 2022. And they also have a long-term plan for 2023 and beyond, with some pretty lofty dollars attached to improving the main street here in Mount Forest. And part of that will be the hopes of securing a red grant with the partnership of the municipality. And I just really can't say enough about the group of people that have come together. We have some folks on the committee that aren't able to be on the BIA as voting members, but they're volunteering their time anyways because they believe in the projects that are being proposed by the BIA. So I just want to thank them because they're doing a great job, and I think the improvements that they're looking to do will really impact the main street here.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. I just have one that I'll add to, and not specifically related to the Mount Forest BIA's AGM, but I think, we need to take a step back sometimes and recognize the valuable contribution that, these people that BIAs are making to our communities. They're involved with investing property owners' dollars into our downtowns, which help our downtowns look more vibrant and alive, help our overall community perception as a community that's moving forward and in a positive way. And so I like to thank all of those volunteers for the time and hours they spend and the ideas and thoughts that they bring forward to, again, help enhance our downtowns. Many people, including myself, see our downtowns as kind of a symbol of the prosperity of our community. And they're certainly doing a huge part in helping us look like a vibrant, prosperous community that we all know we are. So again, thanks to all those volunteers for all that they do. And those of you who sit on the BIAs, please pass along our compliments to the work that they're doing. Any other questions or comments? Okay, then I'll call the motion. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So we'll move on to 2G Part 2. This is from the Rex Park and Leisure Committee from December 7th, and we have a recommendation here that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North endorse the implementation of the Fundraising Committee guidelines as laid out in Report CAO 2021-008, Fundraising Committee Guidelines as recommended by the Recreation, Parks, and Leisure Committee. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that? Yep. Moved by Steve, seconded by Dan. And with that, I'll open the floor for questions or comments. Karen, I saw you had your hand up.
I'm not sure. Mike, do you want to speak to this, or do you want me
Yes.
to? Okay.
Yep, that would be great. Yeah, just wanted to circle in with this report and the recommendation around the guidelines for the members of council that don't sit on rec parks and leisure. There was good conversation around this, and at the committee level, really what we're trying to do from a staff level, and I think from a council and a committee level, is to recognize the autonomy that some of these fundraising committees are looking for with the accountability measures that are required when we're dealing with public funds. So that was the intent around the report and the guidelines. And I know from a staff perspective, we like to dwell on specific policies and drill things into a policy, but we recognize, or have at least recognized, that these fundraising committees all take on a slightly different flavor and a different approach to fundraising. So that's why it's been proposed as a guideline as opposed to a policy, because I don't believe that one size will fit all. This is reflective of asks that have come forward from the Mount Forest Aquatics fundraising group specifically around some of the things that they want to focus on as it relates to fundraising opportunities. Certainly, we want to be supportive of all of these fundraising opportunities, and to be frank about it, council has put the onus on the community groups to raise dollars for recreation type enhancements. So we've created this, and now we're trying to support it in the best way but also recognizing that there is accountability measures that we have to meet as an organization who deals with public funds. So that was the hope, and Chair McCabe can speak separately, but I believe it was well received by Rex Park and Leisure, the committee at the committee level, and hoping that that's also supported by council.
Okay. Steve, go ahead.
I'll jump in. Yeah, it is positive, and I think the service groups in our area see this as a positive as well. And it was well received after good discussion at the rec meeting last Tuesday. And yeah, as Mike said, I'll echo. I hope council sees this as a good opportunity and a good motion as well.
Okay. Other questions, comments? Yeah, I just have a question, and this is just, I want to be 100% clear. I mean, Mike, you referenced this is a guideline, not a policy. So it will really be at the discretion of the individual fundraising committees, whether they want to implement this guideline or not, whether they want to continue as we've operated in the past. It'll be up to them to decide whether that further discretion is something they want to do the additional duties to be able to accommodate.
Through you, Mayor Lennox, yeah, certainly that's my intent, is that it's presented to them as an option for them to consider. And yeah, if they want to take on these additional options, let's say, as it relates to fundraising, these are the parameters that we would ask them to meet. But obviously it would be at their discretion.
Okay, so if they didn't have a person that wanted to volunteer to do the treasury type work, they are not obligated to take this route.
Correct.
Okay. Other questions, comments? All right. I think we have a mover and a seconder. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. All right, we're moving on to part 4 now. And I'll read the recommendation that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North, as recommended by the Recreation, Parks and Leisure Committee, direct staff to amend the fees and charges bylaw to include a quote, cash in lieu of parkland, unquote, fee per the following schedule. For 2022, $2,000, 2023, $4,000, 2024, $7,500, and 2025 proceed with a land valuation appraisal review. And further, the council directs staff to bring a bylaw to require the conveyance of land for park or other public recreational purposes as a condition of the development or redevelopment of land in the Township of Wellington North to a future meeting of council, and further that council authorize the mayor and clerk to sign the bylaw. Okay, could I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Lisa, seconded by Sherry. And with that, I'll open the floor for questions or comments. Steve, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor Lennox. I know this was the $7,500 was first proposed by Mike strongly, and we had great conversation at the committee level. And you know, from going from 1,000 to 7,500 is almost a 700% increase. So around the table, we decided to go double it this year, again, double it the next year, and then bring it up to the 7,500 in 2024. And then have a look at it every year after that as an appraisal review with the land valuation. So that's kind of the gist behind this. We realized that we haven't done anything with this as a rec committee or as a council to increase this park land fee, if you will, or cash in lieu of. And kind of about time that we did something with this, and then setting it up for to proceed with the land valuation in 2025. We'll make sure that we still kind of keep an eye on it and it doesn't fall through the cracks. And this kind of brings it up with land values that have gone up, and it seems like an awful lot, but when you think of the price of land per acre, it's not huge, but this kind of, I guess, phases it in.
Okay. Other questions? Karen, did you have?
Yeah, so staff are recommending that this be deferred, as well as the bylaw 11521, until we get a legal opinion on notice requirements of what we have to do to pass that bylaw. And that will tie in with the recommendation. So we need to amend also bylaw 117, that item on the schedule, to leave it as is until we get that notice, or until we get that legal opinion regarding notice provisions.
Okay. But that doesn't interfere with our ability to discuss this item as we go forward.
No.
Okay. So we might as well have the discussion now, and then if we need to change direction, staff will know, even though we need to wait on the legal opinion. So other questions or comments with regard to this recommendation? Dan, go ahead.
Sherry.
No, go ahead, Dan.
Oh,
go ahead.
I wanted to ask, and Mike and I, we talked about this a little bit before, Mike, at the committee meeting, in regards to the land valuation appraisal review or procedure, and how that works. Maybe if you could explain that in the Coles Notes terms that you explained it to us before.
I was fine with the question, Councillor Yake, until you asked me to, bring the Coles Notes version of it. So
you didn't make any notes, Mike?
Yeah. Watch the video. No, it's a good question. Really, the cash in lieu or the parkland dedication within the Planning Act has kind of its own appeal process. Councillor Hagan, this is what we tried to talk about at committee, that if we, meaning council, establishes a fee after the appropriate notice procedure, and a developer says, "Oh, your fee is out of whack. It's not consistent with the land valuation for my development," they always have the opportunity through the Planning Act to get their own appraisal of the lands to establish the 5% value that again is prescriptive from the Planning Act. So it's got kind of a built-in appeal process at the developers or the property owners' behest, I guess, Councillor Yake, if that makes any sense. So let's say, and just using numbers, I know the recommendation is to phase it, But if we said it was $7,500 for a lot, a developer said, no, I think that's incorrect. They got an appraisal and 5% of the lot that was created through a severance, let's say, said it's 5,000. We would consider the appraisal. In my experience is, unless we think there's a challenge, there's something wrong with the appraisal itself, that we would accept the appraised value, and that would be the contribution, the 5,000, not the 7,500, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So just
go ahead, Dan. You can have a follow up. I know Sherry had her hand up, and I think Steve too. So
okay, so just to follow up on that. So if the developer thinks the number's too high, and he has it appraised, that he can appeal that and have it appraised, right, and possibly come up with a different number, right? And that could happen with any of those numbers, right? Those the 2,000, 4,000, or 7,500.
Correct.
So is the value, the appraised value on a lot, on just a lot, or is it based on a serviced lot or a lot that serviced or built on?
So the value is based on the raw land. So
okay,
to simplify, I guess you would call it unserviced. It's basically the raw land, Councillor Yake.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Sherry, I'm going to go to you next because I know you had your hand up earlier.
I did, and Mike did answer one of my questions, but my other question is in the bylaw that we are going to come up with at a later date, cash in lieu of, is there any way that we can put some kind of descriptive wording in that if it's a larger development, like a subdivision, I guess, that we would anticipate that the developer would put in some kind of green space, that there wouldn't be an option for cash in lieu of parkland?
So through you, Mayor Lennox, a really good question, Councillor Burke. And really the reason we're looking at the cash in lieu and trying to alter it is because, in my estimation anyways, we've left it at a value over the years that makes it more attractive than actually dedicating parkland space to us. So that's part of the impetus for us to look at it more regularly, make the changes so that it's kind of more current, so that there is more of a reflection that happens by the developer to actually donate or give parkland space to the municipality as part of the development. The Planning Act allows it. You can't over incent one and not the other, Councillor Burke, I guess is what I would say. It allows them as options. And there's good reasons for that, but there's no way to say, no, we're not going to take the cash in lieu. You have to dedicate parkland to us. That option has to exist for them. What we're trying to do is make them more equal in terms of value so that it becomes a real consideration on these developments. Because recently the trend would be that most are leaning towards the cash in lieu, because at $1,000 for a lot, that's a pretty good deal for the most part.
And my follow-up question is you talked about the appraisal. If a developer gets a appraisal that is lower than our fee, do we anticipate a lot of appeals? I just feel that if developers feel that it's too high and they're going to appeal it, it might sort of become a make work project.
So the impetus is on the developer to pursue the appraisal, not on the township. But I would say, Councillor Burke, if we make the change, if council endorses making the change, we may see some activity around it initially to kind of feel it out to see if those numbers are really good, and then it will probably dry up. But that's just my own estimation at this point.
Thank you.
Okay, Steve?
Yeah, and I was just going to say one of the reasons I think for the land valuation is we realize that the housing pricing and land pricing has just skyrocketed. Like, it's just unbelievable. And at some point, there might be a correction in the market, and then that would take us back to the drawing board, so to speak, to actually go and reappraise it, or as Sherry and Dan have said, it might lower the a developer might have a lower appraisal, and same as what Mike said, and then we'd negotiate with that. So that's kind of why that little clause was in there, just to have a land value review from 2025 onward.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Yeah, I think, you know, based on what's been happening with real estate values, this is long overdue. And I recognize, I'm sure the committee had some good discussion about the phasing in of this. My concern with the slower phase in is, will this continue to be a financial disincentive to set parkland aside? I know we've had subdivision plans come forward, and often comments are made from us that we'd like to see parkland in there. And certainly the signal we've been sending with our parkland dedication numbers was, no, we're happy to take a small amount of money. I really think we need to Councillor Burke's point, send the message that we want parkland in our subdivisions. And it needs to be reflected in that dollar amount. So I understand the desire to phase it in, you know, ease the shock. I just am concerned that it will continue to be far below the reflective value and the incentive will continue to be to give cash in lieu as opposed to dedicating the parkland. So just concerned about, you know, are we sending the right message fast enough? Mike, I see your hand is up.
And I don't want to belabor it, but it was discussed with the committee, and I think it is a good conversation for council as well. The developers, and rightfully so, will come back and say, listen, any fee that you guys increases the bottom line that we sell the house at, or the condo, or whatever. So that's the counter argument, and most developers know that this municipality has dedicated a lot of time and energy to promoting attainable housing. And when we increase any fee, they see that counterintuitive to attainable housing. I just want to share it for council. That will probably be some of what you may or may not hear from developers, is that, hey, you're just increasing the bottom line for the homeowners or the home purchaser, because they're the ones that pay the fees at the end of the day. So we're trying to, from a staff, we're trying to balance those things. We've dedicated more time and energy towards parks, trails, green space, and we will continue to do that because we know the importance of those in our community. And parkland and dedication of parkland and cash in lieu is just another tool around that. But from a developer standpoint, they'll highlight that this just increases the bottom line of the overall costs of housing.
And I hear your argument loud and clear, Mike, and I know that's the argument that will be made, but I think there's a counter argument that needs to be aired out as well. And that is, affordability is not just the first price of a new home in our community. Affordability is, we talked about it when we were talking about our budget today. Affordability includes the taxes they have to pay, the user fees they have to pay, and what services they get for those fees. And if we're saying we want parkland in our new developments, subdivisions, somebody's going to pay for that. So if it's not the development and the new housing being constructed that's paying for it, then the existing taxpayers are paying for it. And those residents who move into those new dwellings are going to pay for it through taxation. So I think there's a really good argument to be made for development needs to pay for development, because then the overall housing in our community is more affordable because of the ongoing costs of fees, and taxation can remain lower. you know, every time you go to get a mortgage, they want to know what are your property taxes? What's, you know, what are those associated costs with owning a home? Well, these costs have to come from somewhere. And if we believe parkland is important and it has to be paid for from somebody, where's the right place to pay for it? And I guess my feeling is, if we're building a new development, why would we not want them to include parkland as a part of it? And I just worry that we're sending the right message to get that result. Because I think that's clearly what I've heard from this panel of members of council, is that we believe in parkland within our residential developments. So anyways, I'll get down off my soapbox now. And if anybody else has any comments, be happy to entertain them. So I guess based on Karen's recommendation, we would need a motion to defer this. Moved by Sherry.
You have a motion on the floor. You've got a mover and seconder, so you could just do a friendly amendment to defer it.
Okay. Okay. So is everybody comfortable with deferral of this for now?
Yep, for sure, Andy.
Okay. So then I'll call the motion on deferral, and all of those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We'll move on to 3A then. And I'll read the recommendation. It's in regard to the pilot of the City of Guelph Bylaw Enforcement Services. Excuse me. The recommendation is that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North receive report CBO 2021-15, being a report on the City of Guelph Bylaw Enforcement Services pilot, and further that the Council of the Township of Wellington North authorizes the Mayor and Clerk to enter into an agreement with the City of Guelph for the purposes of providing bylaw enforcement services to the Township of Wellington North. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Steve, seconded by Lisa. And with that, we'll open the floor for discussion. Steve, go ahead.
Just a couple comments. I was just going to say, like, overall, how is everything going with the project, with the bylaw officer meeting with the public? Any feedback that way, good, bad, or otherwise? I'll open that to whoever wants to answer that.
Okay, Darren.
Yeah, I'll take a crack at that. Yeah, we've been meeting with the management team with the City of Guelph on and off over the last month. Working with them is going very well. We're getting ready to send out messaging once council makes a decision, and yeah, everything is very close to being in place for January 1st.
Great, that's good to hear. Thank you, Darren.
Okay, other questions, comments? Okay, I'll call the motion then. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, that's carried. Thank you. And we'll move on now to 5C. Sorry, this is in regard to the fees and charges bylaw updates. And we have a recommendation here. Sorry, it's on 2 pages. That the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North received report TR 2021-19, being a report on 2022 fees and charges bylaw updates for various services. And further, the council directs staff to proceed with the updates to reflect the changes outlined herein for the 2022 calendar year. And further, that the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign the bylaw. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Sherry, seconded by Dan. And we'll open the floor for questions or comments. I think, Karen, you wanted to speak to this one?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that the bylaw that supports this, which is bylaw 11721, when we get to that on the agenda, we will have to pull that and amend it to, like, if you look at that bylaw, the parkland dedication fee is $7,500 in there, and we're going to put it back to 1,000 until we get the legal opinion on proper notice. Not related to the fees and charges, but proper notice related to the bylaw requiring conveyance of land for parkland. They're just kind of tied in together.
Okay, so just I'm having trouble wrapping my head around the process.
Okay.
So are we passing the bylaw without that piece?
Yeah,
or are we just modifying it to 1,000?
We're going to pass the bylaw, amending, and we will amend the bylaw to amend that $7,500 fee to the 1,000, pending our legal opinion.
Okay.
So I just didn't want you to, adopt this report and then wonder why we're pulling bylaw 117 later in the meeting.
Okay. Thank you. Mike?
Yeah, basically, Mayor Lennox, we're just leaving that fee the way it is now. We're not changing that fee. All the other changes proposed, assuming council endorses, would be updated, but that fee would remain as is.
Okay.
It's just when you look at that fee right now, that what's been put before the public and in our agenda, it says 7,500. So we want it on the record that that's being amended to 1,000.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Anybody else have any questions, comments? Okay, I'll call that motion then. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We'll move on to 7A now. And this is in regard to the delegation of authority policy. And we have a recommendation here that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North receive the report COK 2021-35, being a report on the delegation of authority policy, and further that the mayor and clerk are authorized to sign the delegation of authority bylaw, and further that the bylaw will become effective January 1st, 2022, and further that policy 33.15 be replaced with policy 003-22 in bylaw 116-21. Okay, could I get a mover and a seconder for that? Moved by Sherry, seconded by Steve. Any questions or comments? Sherry, go ahead.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Lennox. I'm just wondering if Karen would be able to highlight any changes. I went through the report and it sort of looked like it's what happens now. So I'm just wondering if this is just for information for council, or if there are any changes in sort of duty delegation.
Probably it would be best if I just pulled the old policy up. I'll just get that up for you. Hold on. This is much more comprehensive. Am I talking with my microphone off? No. This is much more comprehensive. Many more delegated authorities in them. So let me go back here now.
Aaron, just as you're doing that, I'll maybe Councillor Burke, I think your point is bang on. A lot of the things that were happening weren't probably properly addressed in the old policy. We're just trying to capture all of them. And yeah, there's a lot of different places where authority is delegated, different acts, different staff levels, all those things. The other piece was to try and acknowledge the procurement policy as well in terms of those levels of approvals. So it really was kind of trying to capture a lot of practices that have been happening over a number of years, but haven't formally made it into the policy. So it's a bit of a cleanup and catch-all.
So it's more of a housekeeping.
It is.
Like we like to call it housekeeping, and it's going to pull all of it together.
Yeah. And I think what's important, again, is really important. As Mike said, some of this we were doing, but it just hadn't been captured. So for instance, these were the only delegated authorities we had for legislative matters were 3.
Okay.
And for administrative matters, there were 5. And there were certainly more things that we were doing than what was on this list when you look at what's on the new policy.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments in regard to that? Okay, all those in favor then? That's carried. Thank you. Any notice of motion this afternoon? Okay, so we'll move on to community group meeting program report. Anybody have anything they'd like to report on with community groups? Lisa, go ahead.
I don't have a ton to report. Arthur Chamber, we met last week, a fairly short meeting. Of course, we have Stacey Stevenson as the new administrator. So she's just kind of getting into the role and learning things and learning that Arthur's a little bit different than Mount Forest. I have the Mount Forest Chamber meeting tomorrow, and this week the Cultural Roundtable has their annual Christmas meeting,
okay.
Which should be different than before, but still a lot of fun.
Okay. Thanks, Lisa. Anybody else have anything they'd like to report on this afternoon? Okay. So I guess that moves us, I don't have anything either, so I guess we'll move to bylaws then. So just remind me again, Karen, what we need to do here.
So the recommendation that you're going to read out, please remove bylaw 115.21 and 117.21. And 115 we're just leaving, and 117 we will move a motion separately, an amended version of that.
Okay. So then recommendation here, we'll read then that bylaw number 111 I assume that's a 111-21, not 12.
Oh, yeah, I have a little bit of dyslexia there, sorry.
Okay, the bylaw number 111-21, 112-21, 113-21, 114-21, 116-21, 118-21, 119-21, 120-21, and 122-21 be read first, second, and a third time and enacted. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Steve, seconded by Lisa. Any discussion on those? Okay, all those in favor? That's carried. So then the next recommendation, Karen, would be that bylaw number 117-21 as amended.
Yeah, as amended. And the amendment is going to be that bylaw 117.21 Schedule F item cash in lieu of parkland be amended from $7,500 to $1,000 per lot until legal opinion has been received.
So do you want a formal amendment for that?
No, that's the resolution that you've just read. Like that's our resolution. The
okay.
So I need a mover and a seconder. Yep.
Could we get a mover and a seconder then for that, please? Moved by Sherry, seconded by Dan. Any discussion on that? Okay, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So next we're on to closed meeting. Got a number of items there. And just before we move to the closed meeting, just draw your your attention to the meeting's notices and announcements page. Of course, the Cultural Roundtable was referred to by Councillor Hearn. It's this Thursday. The holiday administrative office closure is December 24th, January 4th. Our next regularly scheduled council meeting is January 10th. The Roma Convention virtually January 23rd to 25th. And our regular meeting of council is the 24th of January for the second meeting in January. Karen, go ahead.
Also, it's just come up, we're getting the plexiglass at the front replaced with real glass. And so that's happening Friday. So anyone planning to come to the office, and we're going to post notices and things, but it's going to be sort of reduced operations for the morning-ish of the 17th of this Friday.
Okay. All right, so we have a recommendation to move into a closed session here. I'll read that. That the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North go into a meeting at 4:34 p.m. that is closed to the public under subsection 239(2) of the Municipal Act 2001, specifically for item A, the security of the property of the municipality or local board. B, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. C, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board. D, labor relations or employee negotiations. E, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board. And F, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. Okay, I need a mover and a seconder for that, please. Moved by Steve, seconded by Lisa. All those in favor? That's carried. We're in closed session.
I just need to stop recording and lock the meeting. So if you just give me a minute.